Welcome to Mythos AI, your source for Cliff's Notes on complex subjects. Join Anna and Phil for yet another engaging conversation.
Welcome to our deep dive into Arthur Miller's The Crucible.
Ah, yes.
We'll be focusing on a scholarly analysis of the play to really get a deeper understanding of its themes and its relevance, both historically and today.
It's a fascinating play.
Yeah.
And this analysis, I think, provides some really interesting insights into its lasting power.
Right.
It goes way beyond just like a simple historical drama, you know, set during the Salem witch trials.
Exactly. And the setting itself, the Salem witch trials back in 1692.
Right.
It serves as more than just a historical backdrop, though, right?
Right.
Miller actually wrote this play during the McCarthy-era, back in the 1950s.
Yeah.
A time when America was really gripped by this fear of communist infiltration.
You know, and I think that's where the brilliance of this play lies.
Yeah.
You know, it's not just about witches in Salem. It's this really powerful allegory for the dangers of mass hysteria and the abuse of power, which I think continues to resonate with us today.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's think about how Miller draws these parallels between the Salem witch trials and the McCarthy era, for example. Abigail Williams, right, the one who really fuels all these accusations in Salem. She kind of mirrors the tactics that were used by Senator Joseph McCarthy.
Yeah, they both understood the power of fear. And they used it. They manipulated public opinion. They exploited anxieties to achieve their own goals.
And it's chilling to see how fear can be weaponized like that to really destroy lives and reputations, often without any real evidence.
Right. It's really about power. And it brings us to another key point, this really rigid structure of Salem society, you know, a patriarchal structure, and how it impacted women.
Right.
Women were largely powerless. Their lives were really governed by these strict puritanical codes.
It's fascinating, though, how Miller portrays Abigail in this context, because despite these limitations placed on women, she still manages to manipulate the system. She kind of turns fear into a weapon to get what she wants.
Right.
Which is kind of an interesting dynamic to explore.
It really is. Her character really, I think, highlights the vulnerability of women in a system that just readily accepted accusations without evidence. Their reputations could be destroyed so easily. And think about Elizabeth Proctor, John Proctor's wife. She becomes a victim of Abigail's scheme.
Yeah, and even though she's a woman of good character, she gets caught up in this web of accusations. And it's a reminder of how easily those accusations could be made, and how little power women had to defend themselves.
Absolutely.
So the play also delves into this complex role of religion in Salem. On one hand, it's a source of, moral guidance, but on the other hand, it becomes a tool for oppression.
That's right. This puritanical belief system, it demanded total conformity.
Right.
And any deviation was seen as suspicious, potentially witchcraft.
Making it so easy to accuse someone.
Right.
And almost impossible to defend yourself.
Think about Reverend Paris.
Yeah.
Or Judge Danforth. They embody this rigid adherence to religious doctrine, to the point where it blinds them to reason and justice.
It's like their actions are driven by this desire to uphold this image of themselves.
Yeah.
And maintain their power within the community, even if it means, sacrificing innocent lives.
Exactly.
So let's shift our focus a little bit to John Proctor, the play's central character. He's grappling with guilt and integrity, this pressure to maintain his reputation in this really stifling environment. Now, at the beginning, we see him hesitant to expose Abigail. He's worried about protecting his own name.
Right.
He's carrying the guilt of his past affair with her.
Of course.
But as the situation in Salem spirals out of control, his focus shifts.
Yeah, he starts to understand the gravity of the situation.
Right.
He realizes he has to speak out against this injustice, even if it means jeopardizing his standing in the community.
It's a real journey of moral awakening. He goes from being concerned with his personal reputation to being willing to sacrifice everything to do what he believes is right.
Right, and ultimately he makes a very profound decision. He chooses to die rather than confess to a lie and save himself.
It's a powerful statement.
It is.
About integrity and the importance of standing up for what you believe in, even when you're facing immense pressure.
Exactly.
And that choice really stands in stark contrast to characters like Reverend Paris, who are so fixated on preserving their reputation that they're willing to compromise their morals.
Absolutely.
So the play also explores this idea of how fear can escalate into mass hysteria and how individuals can exploit that frenzy for personal gain.
Right. It's a chilling reminder of how easily society can spiral into panic and how that panic can be manipulated.
And we see that with Thomas Putnam, who uses the accusations to seize land. He's taking advantage of the chaos for profit.
Exactly.
And then you have the girls led by Abigail, who leverage the situation to gain power and attention. Their accusations are fueled by jealousy and desire for revenge, contributing to this escalating hysteria.
Right. Their actions show how personal vendettas and power struggles can intertwine with these larger societal fears to create this really dangerous situation.
And of course, we see how the authorities in Salem, like Judge Danforth, they use the witch trials to solidify their control. They equate dissent with witchcraft, silencing anyone who dares to question their authority.
Right. It becomes a tool for social control, suppressing individual freedom, silencing dissenting voices.
A warning about what can happen when power goes unchecked, and fear is used to maintain order.
Exactly.
Now we see this clash between individual conscience and societal pressure, not just with John Proctor, but with other characters as well, like Giles Corey, who refuses to name names, even though it means facing a brutal death.
And Rebecca Nurse, another respected member of the community, who maintains her innocence, even when confessing seems like her only option.
These characters show incredible courage, standing by their convictions,
They do.
even when it comes at a high personal cost.
Yeah, their stories show that resisting an unjust system often comes at a price.
Right.
But they also remind us that it is possible to stand up for what's right, even when the consequences are dire. And these acts of resistance are crucial because they challenge the legitimacy of the court. They expose the flaws in the system.
It highlights that moral responsibility to speak out, even when facing this overwhelming societal pressure.
Exactly.
Now let's delve a little bit into how Miller uses language and symbolism to create such a powerful and lasting impact. The play's language is very formal. It's archaic, which reflects the historical setting and that rigid, almost suffocating nature of Salem society.
Right. The dialogue often centers around religious rhetoric and accusations, constantly reinforcing the fear of witchcraft.
Right. And that constant repetition of phrases like, "I saw Goody Proctor with the devil," it really demonstrates how language can be used as a weapon to spread fear and suspicion.
Exactly. Miller shows us how words can be twisted and manipulated to create this climate of paranoia.
Where even the most innocent actions can be misconstrued as evidence of guilt.
Right.
And then there's the symbolism woven throughout the play. Take, for instance, the poppet, the doll that's found in Elizabeth Proctor's home.
Right. Something seemingly innocuous becomes the symbol of how easily ordinary objects can be distorted and used as evidence in this climate of fear and irrationality.
It really highlights the absurdity of the accusations and how little proof was actually needed to condemn someone.
Yeah, and even the title of the play itself, The Crucible, carries a lot of weight.
A crucible, of course, being a container
Yeah.
used for melting metals at extremely high temperatures, a process that separates the pure elements from impurities.
Right. It's a powerful metaphor for the intense trials that the characters endure. This crucible of Salem, it tests their souls, forcing them to confront their deepest fears and revealing the true nature.
Some emerge, like John Proctor, strengthened and purified by their integrity, while others are consumed by the flames of deceit and hypocrisy.
It's a powerful image. It really speaks to the transformative power of adversity and the choices we make when faced with immense pressure.
Yeah.
The crucible represents both destruction and purification. It highlights the consequences of succumbing to fear and the triumph of those who maintain their moral compass.
Right. Even in the midst of chaos.
And I think that's what makes the play so brilliant. This use of language and symbolism adds this incredible depth and complexity to the narrative. It allows Miller to comment on these broader societal issues while staying true to the historical context of the Salem witch trials.
Exactly. And that's what makes this play so enduring. It's a powerful cautionary tale that transcends its historical setting, offering these insights into human nature and the dangers of unchecked power that are just as relevant today.
Yeah, absolutely. So how do these themes resonate with you? Think about how fear and manipulation are used in our own time. How can we resist succumbing to those powerful forces and instead become forces for truth and justice?
It's a question worth pondering.
Yeah.
Because while the specific context might change, those underlying dynamics of power, fear and individual responsibility, they remain timeless.
And we'll delve further into these questions in the next part of our deep dive.
So, when we think about The Crucible, it's not just a historical playwright. It's a warning from the past that speaks directly to us today. It really is. The play's exploration of mass hysteria, the abuse of power, the clash between individual conscience and these societal pressures, it all feels very relevant.
Yeah, and one of the most striking things about the play is how Miller uses this historical context of the Salem witch trials to comment on the political climate of his own time.
Right, he was writing this during the McCarthy era.
Exactly, a period marked by intense fear of communist infiltration in the U.S.
And the parallels between the witch hunts in Salem and the anti-communist witch hunts of McCarthyism, they're pretty undeniable.
Oh, absolutely. Both eras were fueled by fear, suspicion, and this willingness to accept accusations without any real evidence.
Right, it was all about conforming, avoiding being labeled as different or dangerous.
Exactly. Individuals were pressured to confess, to name names, to conform to the prevailing ideology, or face serious consequences.
And it didn't matter if the accusations were true.
It didn't matter at all.
What mattered was appearing compliant.
Right.
And in both the Salem witch trials and McCarthyism, the accused were often denied due process. Their reputations were tarnished. Their lives were disrupted.
And sometimes irrevocably.
Yeah.
So Miller's play really serves as this powerful warning against ideological extremism and the abuse of power, regardless of the historical context.
It reminds us that these dynamics can emerge anywhere, at any time, when fear and suspicion take hold.
Exactly, and it underscores the importance of protecting individual liberties, safeguarding freedom of thought and expression, upholding the principles of justice and due process.
And these principles are the foundation of a fair society.
They are.
They must be protected, even when it's difficult.
Even when it's difficult.
And it reminds us that the responsibility to resist injustice, to defend the vulnerable, it rests with each individual, regardless of the cost.
Right. Speaking out against wrongdoing is essential.
Even when it's risky.
Even when it's risky.
So the Crucible challenges us to consider how we would respond in similar situations.
Right. Would we have the courage to stand up for what's right, even if it meant risking our reputation, our social standing, even our safety?
Would we be willing to pay that price for our convictions?
Right. And it asks us to question our own susceptibility to fear and manipulation.
Are we critical thinkers?
Exactly. Do we question information before accepting it as truth?
Or do we allow ourselves to be swayed by fear and emotional appeals?
The play encourages us to be active participants in our society.
To be aware of the forces that can undermine justice, and to be willing to speak out against those forces.
Exactly. The Crucible isn't just about the past. It's about the present and the future.
It's about understanding those patterns of fear and manipulation.
And the abuse of power that have played out throughout history.
So that we can be better equipped to challenge them in our own time.
Exactly.
You mentioned earlier that the Crucible is a cautionary tale. What are the cautionary elements that you think resonate most strongly today?
Well, for me, it's that chilling reminder that the battle between individual conscience and societal pressure is an ongoing struggle.
It transcends specific historical events.
It does.
It's a battle each of us faces in our own lives.
Yeah.
So how do we win that battle? How do we ensure that individual conscience prevails over the demands of a system that might be unjust or oppressive?
But that's a question that doesn't have an easy answer. But I think the Crucible offers some guidance. It shows us that courage, integrity, and a willingness to speak truth to power are essential qualities for those who seek to challenge injustice.
And it highlights the importance of critical thinking, of questioning authority, of being willing to stand up for what we believe in.
Yes, even when it's difficult.
Even when it's difficult.
It's a call to action. It urges us to cultivate these qualities in ourselves and to encourage them in others.
So how can we apply the lessons of the Crucible to our own lives? What steps can we take to ensure that we aren't succumbing to fear and manipulation and the erosion of our values?
Well, one of the most important things we can do is to be aware of the tactics that are used to manipulate public opinion, to sow discord.
Things like using emotionally charged language.
Yes, spreading misinformation, creating a climate of fear and suspicion.
So it's crucial to be critical consumers of information.
Absolutely, we should question sources, verify facts, and be wary of information that just confirms our biases.
Or reinforces our fears.
Exactly.
We should also be mindful of the ways in which power can be abused.
Yes.
Being aware of how institutions and individuals can use their authority to silence dissent, suppress information, and control the narrative.
Right, and it's important to support organizations and individuals who are working to protect civil liberties, promote transparency and accountability, and challenge those abuses of power.
And ultimately, we must be willing to speak out against injustice, even when it's uncomfortable or inconvenient.
Yes, silence in the face of wrongdoing is complicity.
And we can learn from characters like John Proctor, Giles Corey, Rebecca Nurse. They chose to speak truth to power, even when it meant facing those dire consequences.
Exactly. Their stories remind us that courage is contagious, and that speaking out, even in small ways, can make a difference.
The Crucible is not just a play about the past, it's a play about the human condition, about the choices we face when confronted with injustice, and the power of individual conscience to challenge the status quo.
The Crucible demands our attention, our reflection, and our action.
It challenges us to be better, more informed, and more courageous citizens.
And it reminds us that the fight for justice and freedom is an ongoing battle, one that requires our constant vigilance and our active engagement.
You know, at its core, The Crucible is really a story about resilience, about the power of the human spirit to resist oppression, to uphold the truth. And Miller conveys this so powerfully through, that blend of historical context, these really potent themes, and that striking symbolism.
Yeah, you're right. The play really captures this tension between individual conscience and societal pressure in a way that I think transcends time. It forces us to consider, what would we do in a similar situation? Would we have the courage to stand up for what we believe is right, even if it meant going against the grain?
It's a tough question. And it's something that Miller explores through John Proctor's tragic journey. Now, he's a flawed character, no doubt, but his final act of defiance, choosing death over a false confession, it makes him a symbol of integrity.
It does his story along with the stories of others who resisted, like
Okay.
Giles Corey, Rebecca Nurse. It's a reminder that resistance is always possible. It may not be easy, and it often comes at a high personal cost, but their actions really demonstrate that even small acts of courage can make a difference.
Yeah, and it's interesting how Miller contrasts these acts of resistance with the behavior of characters like Reverend Paris, who are so consumed by their reputation, their social standing, that they compromise their morals.
Yeah, that contrast is really important. Miller wants us to see how dangerous it is to prioritize outward appearances
Right.
over truth and integrity. He's showing us that a society that values conformity and obedience above all else is really ripe for manipulation and abuse.
And it's not just about individuals.
Oh.
The play also explores the role of institutions in perpetuating injustice. The court in Salem, driven by fear and this need for control, becomes a tool of oppression.
Yeah, the course actions highlight how systems of power can be corrupted and used to silence anyone who disagrees. It's a reminder that we need to hold those institutions accountable and ensure they're operating justly and ethically.
So as we kind of wrap up our exploration of The Crucible, what do you think is the most important takeaway? What is it that Miller really wants us to remember?
For me, the play's most enduring message is a call to action. It reminds us that we all have a responsibility to speak out against injustice, to challenge abuses of power, and to defend truth and freedom.
It's a message that really resonates, especially in a world where we're constantly bombarded with information, faced with all these new challenges. The Crucible reminds us that we can't just be passive bystanders. We have to be engaged citizens,
Exactly.
willing to speak up and to act when we see wrongdoing.
It's about recognizing that silence is complicity and understanding that even small acts of resistance can make a difference.
Miller's play really is a powerful call to conscience, urging us to be more aware, more engaged, and more courageous in our pursuit of a more just and equitable world.
I agree.
And on that note, we'll conclude our deep dive into The Crucible. We hope this exploration has given you some new insights and encouraged you to consider its relevance in your own life.
Thanks for listening to Mythos AI. Stay tuned for more concise insights. And remember to hit the like button and subscribe for future episodes.